get on at Azusa or try and go up to, I don't know, Sierra Madre and then cut down to, or go back up the foothill. It's hard to fight your way through Azusa. Azusa.
Your office is in San Dimas?
Mm-hmm. So just south of the freeway.
I didn't realize that.
I never know. I get on at Sunflower and it's just, and if I go off the ramp and I see taillights, I go, oh. It's like, what happened? Not very often, luckily.
Well, you're stuck from there to Grand, right?
Yeah, so I got off in Grand, and then I just go straight. You parallel the freeway, and then you just kind of hoping. All these sound walls, you know, I used to be able to look at the freeway and say,
Right.
oh, okay, we're past the.
I do that really well.
Somebody probably had Waze going in their car, because I seem to be following about 10 people that made the indentation, so I
Right.
said, okay.
Maybe not coming home from here, but I have Waze on in my car all the time.
I think I'm going to use it more. Just, I tend to not
I
use it.
stopped using it because
What?
it was sending me all the wrong direction.
Oh, yeah, it was,
Google Maps is
really-
working now.
it
Yeah.
was diverting you erroneously to, like, you know, off the freeway for no reason.
Ridiculous
Yeah.
differences. Like if we were heading up to Cambria and it said to go the 101.
Oh,
instead
that
the
kind of
5.
stuff.
Like that's a 35-minute difference.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, but negotiating the city, it'll take you down. It'll look like, I was on the 91 and I'm getting off, I was backing up, so we followed. I ended up behind another car, and sure enough, he was going exactly, and it was like an alleyway right next to the freeway, and then make a right at the next alleyway, and you could kind of see and sure enough, it got us around the thing, and I go, well, I'm just following him, because he must have Waze.
I use Waze with like a grain of salt.
Yeah,
But
but
sometimes it's like, oh no, I know that.
I mean, these were like almost alleyways that it seemed like, how in the heck did it find you?
All right, Claire, can we get started? Thanks.
There he goes.
All right, I'll call to order the Planning Commission meeting of Thursday, February 15th. If we can start with roll call, please.
Chair Dennison.
Here?
Vice Chair Pefsner.
Here.
Commissioner Moran. Here. Commissioner Simcock.
Here.
Commissioner Yu.
Barely here.
Chair, you have quorum to conduct business.
Thank you. I'll look for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
To approve.
Sure. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Next up is approval of the minutes of the February 1st, 2024 Planning Commission meeting.
Oh, yeah, good.
No comments, no changes.
Yeah,
All
no
right.
changes.
I'll look for a motion to approve as presented.
So moved.
And a second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. And now we will have our council liaison report.
So I am substituting as your liaison tonight. Hello, everyone. I don't have a lot to report other than maybe just to give you a heads up. On Friday, the council, or 4 of us, met with one of our fire captains, CAL FIRE, and the LA County Fire Department, and most of them, I could not join, went on a tour of our most fire hazardous areas in town and got feedback from CAL FIRE and LA County about mitigation, risk factors, all of those kinds of things. And there are apparently some model code coming from LA County around development requirements where, maybe you tie, for example, certificate of occupancy to certain standards for home hardening, so that you actually can't, with new construction, you can't move into your house and get a certificate of occupancy unless you've met the, whatever it is, 5 feet from your house, no brush, all those kinds of things. So those are model LA County ordinances, and so that's one of the things that we talked about with them. And so, just FYI, that might be something that we might recommend to staff to bring, at least initially, to this commission, just to take a look at some of those things, because obviously, with the high severity fire zones that we have in our town, it would be, and some brush mitigation, less than ideal brush mitigation, I should say. I think it would be good for us to have some enforcement mechanisms. So I think that's all I really have. I know we are going to be getting some of the decisions that you made at your last meeting at our next council meeting. So I think at your next meeting we can report out as to how that went. So
Is that only new construction?
I'm not sure. I don't know the sort of the scope of it. It could actually, I don't know. I mean, it would be nice to have it not be just new construction, because obviously that's probably fewer, fewer homes here than would be if it was a major remodel. But, I would.
Well, but I mean, if you're doing your kitchen and then the guy comes in and wants to see smoke alarms, upstairs, and then he says, oh, now you gotta clear all the brush out and do all this, yard mitigation, otherwise we're not gonna pass off I think it's just, if it's internal, I think it's just gonna drive things, underground.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I guess, part of the discussion, right? Like how broad in scope it could and can be. Obviously, there's only so much we can do around these kinds of things. So, I think that would obviously be part of the policy discussion around, what the triggers would be. So, all right, great, thanks.
Thank you. All right, at this time, any person may address the Planning Commission concerning an item that is not on the agenda. The Commission welcomes your attendance and participation. When addressing the Commission, please begin by providing your name and address for the record. Please keep comments to no more than 3 minutes to assure an orderly and timely meeting.
Lisa Paleo, West Highland.
Hi, good evening. My name is Lisa Paleo, and I live at 672 West Highland, across the street from the Alverno soccer field. The Alverno conditional use permit, planning condition number 6, prohibits Alverno from renting the soccer and softball fields to sports groups not associated with Alverno. I believe that Alverno violated this condition this afternoon. There was a LaSalle High School softball game at 3:00 p.m. today, and another one scheduled for tomorrow. Neither game is posted on the neighbor calendar. I clearly heard the screaming from my home office, which impacted my ability to concentrate on my work. When asked, Chairman Farsing said they aren't renting the field to LaSalle, but letting them use it for free. So technically, they may not be receiving money, but I believe they absolutely violated CUP item number 6. The chairman didn't comment on the duration of the arrangement, but LaSalle is currently removing their baseball field and building a practice gym, aquatic center, performing arts, and sounding stage building, field house, and an Olympic-sized outdoor swimming pool. All softball and baseball activities have ceased on the LaSalle campus and moved to Alverno. The LaSalle 15-year master plan for the project was approved by the City of Pasadena in 2017, and I believe Alverno was in the loop before Alverno submitted their last CUP and master plan. Alverno will inevitably say they are somehow associated with the LaSalle, which is currently a feeder school, but I don't believe this is what is implied by the term associated with in CUP planning condition number 6. Alverno is now a TK-8 school, and LaSalle is a high school. LaSalle is outside of the Sierra Madre borders and is not a member of the same sports league as Alverno. Alverno is CYO, Catholic Youth Association, and LaSalle is CIF, California Interscholastic Federation. They're going to say that there's no impact on Alverno neighbors if LaSalle is using the softball field, but of course there is. Today I heard the screaming, whistling, and cheers of young adults, coaches, and dozens of spectators while I was trying to work. I can hear the constant pinging of the bat on the aluminum bats, the ball on the aluminum bats. Third base foul balls go outside the Alverno property and onto my street. Attendees are parked on my street, and Wilson, and Grandview, and Michelinda, preventing some of us from parking outside of our own homes. And there's traffic, a lot of it, and we just want to get home from work and not have to deal with traffic on our own streets. I fear this is a slippery slope, and Alverno will open the field to others not associated with the field. Visitors don't understand agreements that are in place with Alverno regarding parking, traffic, and noise, and may violate the CUP further. Sure, high school sports are important. We can all agree to that. And LaSalle is definitely an important part of the San Gabriel Valley community. But I don't think Alverno neighbors should be impacted by LaSalle's expansion efforts, which will increase their school campus by 84,000 square feet and bring financial benefit to LaSalle and their constituents in the city of Pasadena. It's all about the cumulative effect that neighbors are subjected to as a result of Alverno's TK8 school and sports activities both during school and after school, Sierra Madre Softball League, city activities, villa rentals, filming, religious activities, and now allowing other schools to use their sports facilities. I request that the Commission revoke the CUP per condition 5.2.1, that the permit was obtained by fraud and the violation of Planning Commission number 6, or at the very least, add the issue to future meetings and further clarity outside of the property and revise the CUP. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? All right. At this time, we will have a discussion on general plan and housing element, the 2023 annual progress reports. Does city staff have a presentation?
Yes, Chair, Planet Wolf will be delivering a staff report.
Thank you, and good evening, Commissioners. Tonight, I just have a brief report regarding the General Plan Annual Progress Report and the Housing Element Annual Progress Report, both for the calendar year 2023. First, for the General Plan Progress, there was one amendment to the General Plan's safety element, which is just a small update to the language of Chapter 3's hazard prevention. That only adds a website link to the city's local hazard mitigation plan. Doing so keeps the city eligible for state share local costs that exceed 75% of the state's eligible costs. Second, for the general plan progress, the city was awarded a CalApp grant from the California Energy Commission in the amount of $40,000 for the implementation of online solar permitting, or what has sometimes been referred to as instant solar permits. The city has implemented Solar App with a pilot program offered to several frequent residential solar contractors, and the pilot program allows technical issues to be resolved so that by September 30th, 2024, the program can be fully launched. For the housing element progress report, the city is required by Government Code Section 65400 to provide an annual report to the Governor's Office of Planning and Research and to California's Housing and Community Development Department on its progress towards fulfilling its regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA, obligation. The report published has since been updated as staff has discovered several projects which were missing or not updated. The updates are positive and for this reporting year and are updated in summary table as well as table B, and they are provided for you at the dais. So in 2023, 26 building permits were issued for ADUs and 2 were issued for above moderate income homes. The total of 28 units counts towards infill development, and for the city's RHNA obligation, 2023 has shown to be a record-breaking year for ADUs, permitting more than the prior 2 years combined. Because HCD recognizes Sierra Madre's ADUs to be implicitly low-income units, the city has already completed fulfillment of and exceeded its obligation to construct low-income units, where we have 47 versus our needed 39. Cities that are able to satisfy their entire RHNA allocation for all income categories are no longer subject to certain state housing laws, including Senate Bill 35, and portions of the Housing Accountability Act. To satisfy RHNA, the city will need to permit 79 very low income units, 34 moderate income, and 42, coincidentally, above moderate income housing units within the housing element cycle. Now, you might be wondering why this is the first time the Planning Commission is receiving this report. Interestingly, staff has found that under Government Code Section 65400, the city's planning agency, as it's defined, is required to provide the report to OPR and HCD, and Title II of the Municipal Code establishes the Planning Commission as the planning agency. Therefore, acceptance of these reports as prepared by staff must be made by the Planning Commission. That concludes my report.
Go ahead.
What was the government code again? 65,
65400.
and that's a state government code?
Yes.
What is Senate Bill 35 that we won't have to comply with?
I would like to defer to City Attorney.
We will cover it very briefly today, but it's a permit streamlining project. So if the city receives an affordable development project, that specific affordable development project, if it follows SB 35, it's going to be handled administratively, no CEQA, all that. So if we are able to satisfy these requirements, then an SB 35 project will have to go through CEQA, it will come before the Planning Commission, et cetera.
But it doesn't obviate any of the objective standards that have to be used or any.
Correct, that all still applies.
Okay. So was that an annual number that you were referring to, or our 9-year arena cycle?
Which numbers exactly?
You said that we had exceeded, what number did you say? 37, 74?
Oh, yeah, 30, 47,
Correct.
39,
47.
39.
So in the 2023 calendar year, we permitted 26 low-income units. The total required for the whole cycle, one moment, is 39. And our counts amount to 47 permitted.
So we've already exceeded for the rest of our arena cycle.
For low-income units, yes, and ADUs are considered to be low-income units.
Okay.
We do anticipate more ADUs permitted over the course of the remaining cycle.
And this says 6th cycle. I thought we just got this approved by HCD last year. So how could we be on our, or does it count down?
So the 6th cycle is an 8-year process. We're in year 3 of this cycle.
This has happened 6 times. This 8-year cycle has happened 6 times already, or we're in. It's the 6th time.
Okay.
So they didn't have this 48 years ago.
Yeah, I think it was in the 80s where they came up with housing element.
Well, 73,
And does it list
70.
what our arena goals are by very low? If we put any on there, it's gonna be a stretch, but
So if you want to turn to Table B,
gotcha.
in the column that's headed by the number 1, where it reads RENA allocation by income level, in those green cells, those are the units we need to fulfill. So there would be 79 very low income, 39 low income, 35 moderate income, and a total of 51 above moderate income, for a total of 204.
And moderate is that zone where they're giving an extra density bonus as well as very low. I believe when you gave your presentation, the last update, that when we talked about the increased density bonuses, there were 2 categories that got like a double bonus.
Mhm.
And moderate was one of those?
Correct.
Okay. Which mirrors perfectly exactly what our performance is. And can you refresh our memory as to what happens if we don't hit these numbers?
If I can defer to the city attorney, please.
So there is no requirement for the city to build units. The city just has to zone for units. Now, if the private marketplace doesn't build these units, really there is no practical consequence to the city. The problem really lies in a situation where the next cycle comes up, and in the next cycle, if units weren't built at that site, if they were designated for affordable housing, then
Can't use it.
they're going to be subject to ministerial approval as opposed to the current process. So if they go 2 cycles of the housing element without development, then they're going to be subject to upzoning and ministerial approval. Those specific sites will be. And that's under current housing element law. Who knows what the case is going to be
Right.
in 6 years.
Because one of the laws that you told us about last time, they can come in and kind of do that already right now with density bonuses, right?
With density bonuses, yes, they can make adjustments to our code.
But most of the ADUs are ministerial anyway, right?
Correct.
Oh,
All of them. So I mean, so we get RENA numbers using our ADU. I know they limit us as to how many we're allowed, and then they cycle through and no one ever does them. But the opportunity existed. What's the penalty? I mean, what's the downside? They're still ministerial. If they fall out after 2 cycles, what do we care, right? I mean,
Yeah, with respect to ADUs, it wouldn't matter.
right.
But it's really with respect to
Very
big
low.
projects.
The other,
very low and
the other
moderate then.
things we have to designate that they never get done.
Right.
And because we can't really, and then we can't use them again as well, correct?
The
In
same
future
site?
Cycles, correct? We can't just, the next RENA cycle, say, oh, they never built on these 12, so we're gonna grab those again and redefine them as RENA numbers.
No, I believe you can. Yeah.
We reuse some of the same sites.
I don't know, this is the 3rd time I've done this. I don't remember us being able to redesignate sites. Well, Karen Warren did all the, I'll ask her again, I guess. Okay. It's okay.
Any other questions for staff? All right. As this was a discussion, do we take public comment? All right, at this time, we will welcome anybody to come forward and address the Planning Commission concerning this specific item on the agenda. The Commission welcomes your attendance and participation. When addressing the Commission, please begin by providing your name and address for the record. Please keep comments to no more than 3 minutes to assure an orderly and timely meeting.
Is this just for the housing item? Or is it just open?
We already had the
Oh,
general
you already had
comments.
that?
Yeah,
Oh,
this is for
okay.
the, yeah, the meeting starts at 7, and that's like the 3rd thing on the agenda.
All right. Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak? All right. As this is only a discussion, right? So we don't have to take a vote on this?
It's not an action item, I don't believe. Is it an action item?
I thought it had to be an action item so that we could approve.
So the action is acceptance. There wasn't alternatives presented, but the commission certainly does have the alternative to modify, continue, deny.
Okay. All right, so then I guess I'm looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve it as presented.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Next up, we have the city attorney to give us another legislative session.
Thank you, Chair. This is part 2 of our update on the 2023 year-end legislative report, Housing and Land Use. I'm going to be covering a slew of bills, and some of this will also be informational for staff because I don't think I've covered some of these with staff yet. So when the presentation is up, I will begin. All right, next slide. So I always come back to this slide. This is a slide that was generated by HCD to note the different steps they've taken to facilitate development and limit local control when it comes to housing and development. So now we're going to be talking about what I've highlighted here, limitations on development standards. These 2 bills are from this past legislative session. Under AB 1308, the city cannot increase the minimum parking requirements that applies to a single-family residence as a condition of approval of a project to remodel, renovate, or add to a single-family residence, provided the project does not cause the single-family residence to exceed any maximum size limits imposed by the applicable zoning regulations. In layman's terms, if the applicant wants to remodel or renovate their home or add something to their home, and they're not requesting a variance, we then can't require additional parking. Now, it's not something commonly done in Sierra Madre. At least I don't think I've ever seen it happen here, where it becomes a conditional approval that they have to add a new parking spot, but other cities have done this in the past. AB 894 allows applicants to satisfy local parking requirements through a shared parking agreement on underutilized lots under very specific circumstances. And I'm wondering, do we have, I'm turning to the planning manager, do we have, does our municipal code contemplate shared parking agreements? I think, do we have anything like that? No.
Don't.
Okay.
I think we have some legacy.
We do have some legacies for commercial uses. If they cannot comply with the parking requirement, then we can count the adjacent parking lot towards the parking requirement.
Right.
What constitutes underutilized?
There's a specific definition. I don't have it in front of me now, but essentially the state is trying to make sure that the space isn't being taken up with a bunch of parking lots, that instead of having a bunch of parking lots, that'll be put to some commercial or residential use, and that the parking lot spaces are being used as efficiently as possible.
I had a question on 1308. Currently, I believe that we have some covered parking spaces tied to the size of the house in one of the zones. So is that an example that AB 1308 would not trip up because it's already part of our zoning?
Correct. This is additional parking. Additional parking beyond what's required under our municipal code.
Okay. Okay.
So these are actually two bills that caught my attention this past year as we were working through a lot of these different projects that were coming before the city that I really wasn't that aware of the last time I did this legislative session, so I want to flag them. The first is AB 2097. The city cannot impose or enforce any minimum automobile requirements on a residential, commercial, or other development project located within half mile of a public transit unless specific findings are made. It's not super relevant to the city because we don't have, nowhere in the city is within half mile of a major public transit stop. But it is a very big deal for the Pasadenas and the Glendales. And so this is just something worth noting, how difficult it is now to impose some of these parking requirements. AB 916, the city cannot require a public hearing as a condition of reconfiguring existing space to increase the bedroom count by a max of 2 bedrooms within an existing dwelling. So if there's a home that wants to tear down walls to have more bedrooms, they can do that without going to public hearing before the Planning Commission, so long as, one, they don't create more than 2 bedrooms, 2 new bedrooms, and 2, it doesn't result in new units. So if an addition to the home was actually a unit and it's not considered an ADU, it would come before this body.
Today, this wouldn't come before us anyway.
Would it?
No, because it's already existing.
So if there's an addition to the home, sorry, not an addition. If there's
Configuring, yeah.
right, if there's going to tear down walls inside the home, this would never come before the city planning
no.
commission.
We don't have any purview over purely internal stuff.
Right. So again, a bill not particularly relevant to Sierra Madre. AB 1489, for a housing development, this is something that we were just grappling with this week. For a housing development project, the city cannot impose an FAR less than a 1.0 for a project with 3 to 7 units. Neither can it impose a floor area ratio less than 1.25 for a project with 8 to 10 units. And it cannot deny a project on a legal parcel for failing to meet minimum lot size requirements. Now, we were dealing with a project with respect to that first limitation, imposing an FAR less than 1.0 for a project with 3 to 7 units in the R313
313.
zone. So this one did come up this week.
Can you give us examples of this?
Would staff like to give the example?
So the existing municipal code for R313 has a requirement of permitted uses right now, which is in tiers. So the first tier is for those lot sizes that are up to, I think, off the top of my head, 6,750 square feet. That only permits 1 unit. In the next category, where that shifts up to about 8,000, I believe, that allows for 2 units. And tier 3 and beyond does allow for 3 and up. In those lots that are less than 6,750, where it only permits 1, a housing development project proposing 3 would be granted a 1.0 FAR. And there are quite a number of properties that are zoned in the R313 that are less than that size. So they are eligible for this.
Okay, so switching now from limitations on development standards to permit streamlining. This, I think we did, at least we covered it with staff. I'm not sure if we covered it with this commission yet. But everything we've spoken about to date really had to do with the entitlement process. Not so much with the post-entitlement process, building permits, etc. And the state found that a lot of these projects are just languishing in the post-entitlement phase because there were no deadlines to issue permits after entitlement. So I'll kind of explain what this is in a moment. AB 281 applies to all post-entitlement permits, for example, building permits, grading permits, for housing development projects, including single-family homes. It does not apply to discretionary and ministerial permits. So, your entitlements, either for ADUs or CUPs or whatever they may be. AB 281 requires special districts to also respond to post-entitlement permit applications within 30 or 60 days. So it's not just on cities, it's on special districts as well. Often special districts are the ones, not in Sierra Madre, but in other cities, they're the ones that are doing the water connections and sewer connections. Let me skip ahead and I'll come back to this slide. Now, with all the laws, there is a complete permitting life cycle from beginning to end for a permit, from entitlement to post-entitlement. So there was the Permit Streamlining Act, which existed for many, many years, and now we have all these post-entitlement requirements. When an application is submitted here, the city has 30 days to determine whether it's complete. Once a determination of completeness is made here, then under the Housing Crisis Act, we have 30 to 60 days to determine whether that complete application is consistent with our municipal code. From there, it goes before this body, the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission has 5 hearings under the Housing Crisis Act, which we'll talk about. Now, assuming the Planning Commission approves that permit, it's entitled. And when it's entitled, it's going to expire after a year per our code, unless they seek a 1-year extension. Now, that's the entitlement phase. This law deals with post-entitlement. So at the post-entitlement phase, they submit an application. City staff has 15 business days to act on that post-entitlement application to determine whether or not it's complete. If the city determines it is complete, then depending on the size of that project, we have 30 to 60 days to issue that permit. And then once that permit is issued, that building permit, they have a year to exercise it, depending on certain types of permits, and they can extend it for up to 6 months. There's also appeal procedures here at different stages of this project in case the applicant is unhappy with our determination and decides to appeal staff's determination. But this is the first time this has happened, where we know from beginning to end, we have a shot clock for everything. And so it's incredibly important for us to have the resources and the know-how to get this done in a timely manner. Because if we don't get it done in a timely manner, it's deemed complete. Meaning whether we choose to make it complete or not, if we fail to act in time, it's deemed complete. Questions on this slide before I move back?
So just to clarify what's happening at each of these phases, so we get, I'm gonna call them preliminary plans, right? And we check how complete they are, and then they come before either the planning commission or they get stamped. And then it goes into the, what's the second phase?
Entitlement?
The entitlement. They're issued in an entitlement, and then they have to deliver us the final plans. Is that right?
Not quite.
What happens in the entitlement phase that we haven't seen, either ministerially or commissioner?
Can you ask that question again? What happens in the entitlement phase that you haven't seen?
What's happening in the entitlement phase that didn't happen before the entitlement phase? Like if they're submitting a set of plans and it's complete and we've checked it and say that this is a complete application, what's happening in entitlement that didn't happen yet?
Post-entitlement.
Post-entitlement.
So in the entitlement phase, nothing has changed. We already had the Permit Streamlining Act that we have to respond within 30 days. So the new law happens after they receive the entitlement. So from post-entitlement is where they submit the construction plan, so we call the plan check, along with structural calculations and all that, Title 24 calculations. So when they submit to building department, that plan check said, we have 15 days or 30 days to respond.
And I think I think the chair is also asking, are those structural plans and building plans, are they available at the entitlement phase, or do they only become available in the post-entitlement phase?
They're only available in the post-entitlement phase because in the design phase, structural engineers and soil report, all that are all preliminary schematics. So when they start construction plans, those will be calculated.
So the 1-year period that they're talking about is you get all of your entitlements approved, then you utilize that information to put together your set for the building set, right? Now, how does that affect revisions and those kinds of things? Does the clock start over every time they get a revision?
Correct. So if staff determines the application to be incomplete, then they send it back to the applicant and there's a new 30-day shot clock. Or in the case of the post-entitlement permit, a 15 business day shot clock.
And most of what comes in at that phase has somebody's civil stamp on it.
Correct. Either it's an engineer stamp on it, either structural or civil.
Yeah, I guess I'm asking that mostly because it seems like that's the most important phase and now has the least amount of time.
I think the clock starting over, I mean, most plan checks are gonna take 2-3 times anyway, so I think it's just the expediting the in-between stages is where the shot clock comes in. I mean, it's still gonna take 2-3 times going back and forth, right, so.
Yeah, I was just,
you know.
when we think about how much time city staff has to spend on it, 15 business days to go over in-depth drawings like that seem like, you know.
Yeah. I think it's gonna put a heavier burden on people like Roldan that we use and all of that stuff for sure, yeah.
So if I go back to my previous slide, one of the things that's going to be one of the things that's required as of January 1st, 2024, is that we start processing entitlements online. We've contracted with a vendor. That'll be up and running soon, I believe. But that is supposed to speed up this process. That's one. Two, we are required under AB 2234, which is also related to post entitlements, to provide complete sets of applications for ADUs, duplexes, mixed-use, multifamily, and townhomes. So people could just copy paste essentially, or at least they know what needs to be included in the form in order to make it past the post-entitlement plan check. And those are all up on the website now, I believe. Is that correct?
They are on the website.
We have developed a comprehensive post-entitlement application, so that's already done. Until the online portal is ready to go, we are receiving applications via email too. Is that correct?
Correct. We can receive application in person or through email.
So a lot of new state mandates with the intention of speeding things up, but it does place a great burden on staff. We've had to contract out more of these responsibilities.
How long is the time between when we do our annual update of fees and us understanding what the additional cost is to this? Like, what's that time period?
You mean the new fiscal year fee schedule proposal?
Yeah.
They usually come around April.
And with this state law having happened just recently, we won't even know what those effects are. So we're probably going to be undercharging for fees through this fee cycle.
That's correct. And our finance department is conducting a fee analysis. So hopefully we can analyze all the extra burden and then extra hours to put it into each plan check process.
And my understanding is we can't be profitable per se on those, but can we make a fair market estimate as to what the increase in these costs are and get that included in the schedule?
Currently, yes, but there's a proposition on the ballot that would change that.
Of course there
They
is.
read your mind.
But currently, yes.
Okay. So for this year, we're okay, but next year,
We don't know after November 2024.
okay.
Should charge for future.
Right.
Okay,
People will
so
love that.
we talked about limitations on development standards. We talked about permit streamlining. Now the Housing Crisis Act.
Well, they're gonna cap
I,
it.
I want to note something here. State density bonus law has been on the books for a long time. It's been amended and, really beefed up, but it's been there for a long time. ADU law, also been there a long time. Housing Accountability Act, been on the books for a while. Limitations on development standards, nothing new. Permit streamlining, we had entitlement streamlining, post entitlement streamlining is new, but the Housing Crisis Act of 2019, that was somewhat of a game changer. I remember when I was drafting the legislative memos, I would send it to the senior attorneys for their review, and they'd send it back to me saying, there's no way this is correct, you redo it, because they couldn't believe how drastic some of these changes were. What I'm gonna go over was adopted in 2019, but I'm going over it because it's something very important. It impacts everything we do here, and so I just wanted the commission to be aware. But before we do that, HCD has a little dialogue that if Commissioners you and maybe Simcock wouldn't mind engaging, if Commissioner Simcock will go first.
Sure. Do you know what I find disagreeable?
What?
Well, there are a few different land use decisions being taken by cities that I feel just aren't helping the housing crisis.
Could you give me a few examples?
I see issues with one, downsizing or otherwise reducing residential development capacity. Two, the imposition of development moratoria and development caps. And three, the use of non-objective development standards.
I'm glad you got that part. Yeah, I see your point. It might be good to hold off on that type of stuff until we get our housing issue sorted out.
So again, a slide from HC to give you a sense of how the regulator is seeing these laws. Okay, so it only applies to affected cities, but almost every city in an urban area is an affected city, including Sierra Madre. And the list of affected cities are on HCD's website. It makes substantive amendments, but it also makes procedural amendments, and we'll get into what those are. First, the 5 hearing rule. You've heard me talk about this a couple of times now. The 5 hearing rule comes from this law. If a housing development project has a complete application that complies with all objective development standards, then the city is limited to 5 hearings in connection with the approval of that housing development project. A hearing includes public hearings, workshops, appeals, continuances conducted by the planning commission, city council, doesn't matter. If the city is doing it in front of the public, it's gonna count as a hearing. It excludes, interestingly, legislative approvals, which is why when we split up the Meadows project at the staff level into legislative approvals and discretionary approvals, we did that on purpose to avoid the 5 hearing limitation. Applicant-led meetings, so the applicant can always choose to have their own workshops, and that doesn't count against the city. Hearings before an application is determined complete, which in the future we might take advantage of. If there's a big project coming down the pipeline, even before the application is complete, we might hold a public hearing or workshop on it so the public's aware of what's coming, so it doesn't count against our 5 hearing limit. And number 4, hearings held by other legislative bodies. So if the county needs to hold a hearing on approving some aspect of another project, that shouldn't count against the city. The 5 hearing rule. That was a big one. Here's another big one. We haven't really seen this play out because the city hasn't really been downzoning, but I'm gonna explain, this is complex, I'm gonna explain how this one works. Existing law, there's an existing law, an existing rule called no net loss density. This concept comes from the housing element law. It says that the city cannot reduce the general plan or zoning densities of residential parcels unless the city identifies other sites where it can proportionally increase densities. So if we're gonna downzone one section, we have to upzone another section so that the densities remain the same. Relative unit count remains the same. Here's what this new law says. The city cannot reduce the building intensity of residential parcels below that in effect as of January 1st, 2018, unless the city identifies other sites where it can proportionally increase intensity. And so you're gonna ask me, what does intensity mean? Less intensive use includes reductions in height, density, floor area ratio, new or increased open space or lot size requirements, new or increased setback requirements, minimum frontage requirements. I can keep going, but basically every development standard you can think of. So if we change a development standard in a zone to make it more restrictive, we have to make a parallel amendment somewhere else in the city to make that development standard less restrictive, to balance out the intensity of use. So I wrote down a question here in my notes. Can a home be converted into an office? Thoughts? Can a home be converted into an office under this intensity, no net loss intensity limitation?
No, because you're reducing residential.
It can, but you'll have to designate somewhere else to accommodate a residential development at that same intensity.
Well, but zoning could stop that. If you're in the residential zone and you convert something to an office, doesn't that make it a commercial building?
Can you give me that fact pattern one more time? Let me think through that. If you
There's
have
a house that's in a residential zone,
right,
you change it to an office,
right,
it's no longer a residence.
correct,
So you've changed it out of its zoning.
correct. I think that would be fine. So that you could do, but let's say the city were to, if an applicant placed a request to turn a residential lot to rezone it to commercial, we can facilitate that rezoning, or multifamily or something, but we can facilitate that rezoning, but if we do facilitate that rezoning from a residential use to a commercial use, we'll have to rezone elsewhere. And there are findings that need to be made in the resolution itself. Moratoria. Existing law. Under existing law, the city can adopt urgency measures to protect public safety, health, welfare by blocking approvals of entitlements. If you remember, when I started here, there was a water moratorium in place that prevented new homes from receiving water connections, and as a result, new homes weren't getting built because you need a water connection in order to have a safe and habitable home. This law is still on the books, but now HCD is saying, or the state's saying, that if the city chooses to adopt some kind of moratoria like this, they have to get HCD approval first. And that's a difficult burden to meet. Before, cities could do this unilaterally, impose moratoria, say we're stopping building until, you know, our water issue improves, and the findings we made by the city, and no one would question it. It was the city council's prerogative. Now HCD has to approve that.
Is HCD a council that makes this decision, or does it go into a black hole of administrivia and you get an answer out the other side?
It's administrative. It's an administrative body. Objective design standards, the chair kind of mentioned this. So under existing law, and this is still in the books, the city cannot disapprove an affordable housing project due to design review standards unless it makes written findings. Under the new law, the city cannot impose or enforce design standards established after January 2020 that are not objective. We can't, so I remember when this law came about, staff looked at each other and we said, we cannot amend our design review permit, the design review permit findings. Because the findings that are in place before January 2020, we can impose. But as soon as we amend them, they become new requirements that exist after January 2020. And to the extent they're not objective, they can't be enforced at all for any project, period. Currently, we can still enforce our design review findings for single-family homes, improvements, etc. We can't enforce it for housing development projects subject to the Housing Accountability Act, different category. Bigger projects. Small projects, we could still enforce our design review standards. But under this law, if we tweak those, and those tweaks are not objective, as defined by this statute, can't be enforced.
Only the tweaks can't be enforced, or the entire thing?
Well, uncertain.
Yep.
But it's something I don't want to test.
Hasn't
Right.
been tested yet, I
Yeah.
believe was your quote on that.
Yeah.
And today, the only thing that design standards apply to are single-family resident, not multifamily, right?
I mean, it can apply to a multifamily that's not adding units if they're just doing improvements to the multifamily.
But as soon as there's more than one,
As soon as they're contemplating the creation of 2 units or more, then the standards don't apply.
so adding an ADU, I know the ADU is already,
But if it's a single-family home in an ADU, no longer applies.
right, so build the ADU and then redesign your house, and it would never be subject to design standards.
Build the ADU, and then, no, if you build the ADU first, and then separately you apply for a redesign of your home, it would be subject to it. The application itself has to contemplate the creation of 2 units. In your example, the application itself wouldn't contemplate the
Gotcha.
creation of 2 units.
So you have to do them at the same time, and then you're no longer subject to design review.
Right, and I'm just confirming here with staff, that's also
That's correct.
understanding, okay. Restrictions on development standards, not something we really see in Sierra Madre, but other cities were doing this. Placing limits on the number of entitlements issued per year, placing caps on the number of housing units allowed in the city, placing limits on the population, all things that were being done that are no longer allowable. No net loss of housing units. This is kind of similar to the no net loss intensity and density issue. The city cannot approve demolition of residential dwelling units, bless you, unless the project creates at least as many residential dwelling units as demolished. Bless you. There are more stringent requirements for protected units. Protected units include those that are subject to affordability covenants, local rent or price controls, which we don't have in the city, are or were occupied by very low or low income households in the past 5 years, which we do have in the city, or withdrawn from the rental market under the Ellis Act in the past 10 years, and I won't go into that example. That has to do with reoccupying residential developments. It also establishes the tenant protections that are heavily used, not so much in Sierra Madre, but statewide. No evictions within 6 months before the start of construction. So I guess to phrase that a little more clearly, you can't evict someone until you're about to start, until 6 months right before you start construction. So basically, I want to keep people in their homes as long as possible is the idea. If the developer is going to evict someone that's in a protected unit, the developer has to provide them with relocation benefits, and when they build a new unit, a first right of refusal, because they want to make sure they're not displacing people.
What constitutes start of construction?
I'm not sure. I think it's breaking ground, but I'd have to check the statute. I don't think it's pulling building permits, though.
Right, I don't think that is either.
Okay, and the last part of this presentation for this year is streamlined ministerial approval process. Earlier we had mentioned SB 35. This was the mother of all streamlined ministerial approval processes. It was the first one of its kind. And from SB 35, we've seen mutations of it in different forms, and we'll talk about that in this presentation. The new ones, though, so you see, these are all of these are new. They all came in different years, but the new ones are highlighted in yellow. Hotel motel conversion projects are streamlined under certain circumstances. University religious institution projects are streamlined under certain circumstances, and multifamily development up to 10 units streamlined under certain circumstances. So let's look at this first one, 1490, that was the motel hotel conversion. Basically, if you have a multifamily housing development project, and the development involves retrofitting and repurposing a residential or commercial building that allows temporary dwellings or occupancy, right? So if it was a motel or hotel, to create new residential units out of it, and certain percentages affordable, then you get to streamline it, you avoid CEQA, all of that. I'll tell you what this was addressing. What happened during COVID, if you all remember, if you've heard of Project Home Key and Room Key, the state got federal government money and created a pool of funding for cities to apply for. Cities applied for this pool of funding and helped motels and hotels who were suffering at the time convert their hotels and motels into temporary housing for homeless or some kind of low-income residential housing. It was a very successful program. It was really quick. A lot of conversions happened in a very short period of time. We had a significant increase in residential unit count. But that was all contingent on the city applying for that type of financing. Now, in a lot of cases, we saw it a lot in Pasadena. The city would go to the community and say, we want to apply for Project Home Key using, federal government taxpayer funds. What do you all think? And then the residents would ask, well, what are you putting there? And then the city would say affordable housing, and then they all oppose it, and the project would die. The city wouldn't apply for the funds. This takes it out of the city's hands. That pot of money is still there. Project Home Key and Room Key are still options for a city. What this does is it allows the developer to avoid getting that kind of city approval and just build that type of conversion project if they meet these requirements. And it's a really specific set of requirements. SB4, kind of a similar deal. SB4 has to do with land owned by churches, so like religious institutions, and institutions of higher education. So not Cal State and UC systems, independent, so private universities. All units have to be for lower income households, so it has to be 100% affordable if they're going to take advantage of this law. And if they do, then again, often they get to avoid CEQA. It's like ministerial approval, etc. SB.
Can we go back to that one?
Sure thing.
When we did our last RENA, we polled the local religious, the churches, and said, would you consider developing in some of your space low-cost housing? And I think only one of them said that's something that we could consider. Because of this new law, do we get to apply every church as a potential RENA location?
No, we don't get to do that in the same way that we couldn't use the density bonus law to say every site is technically eligible for a density bonus, so we should get more unit count for it. But I'll say that our religious housing overlay mirrors this a lot. It's as if the state was watching us the whole time and stole our idea.
We are vanguards here in Sierra.
This SB 684 is probably the biggest deal out of all of them, because it's not limited to religious institutions and very specific hotel conversions. So SB 684 requires ministerial approval without discretionary review or a hearing of a subdivision map for a housing development project that meets the following: 10 or fewer parcels of no less than 600 square feet, 10 or fewer units created on those parcels, no greater than 1,750 square feet, zoned for multifamily, and you need to build up to the density that the statute contemplates. So picture this: a plot of land can be divided, a single lot, now, if they follow all these steps, can be subdivided into 10 lots, and they can build 10 single-family homes as part of like an HOA complex. It's part of essentially homeowner association. Or they can divide that parcel up into maybe fewer parcels, but build up to 10 units on those fewer parcels. Again, if they follow these very specific procedures. Let me show you, I know this is the most daunting chart ever, and it just keeps growing because I've only added to it as the new laws come about, but let me show you what this streamlining looks like. Planner Wolf, are you able to zoom in on this? Maybe if you exit the presentation mode and then we can zoom in on just this purple part. This purple part is everything we were just talking about. You can click in the right corner, all the way in the right corner. Oh, okay. Okay, so first question under this chart is, can you zoom in just a little more? And scroll to the left, please. Thank you. So, we have a housing development project. If it's proposing multiple units in a non-residential zone, and this is the biggest deal, because never before, prior to 2017, there was never a situation under state law where a residential development could be built in a non-residential zone. If the city zoned it commercial, industrial, institutional, whatever it is, that's it. Unless the city's municipal code contemplated some kind of conditional use permit that allowed for residential development, impossible for anyone to develop residential development in these places. So this was the first really big deal about these. Now, if it's proposing affordable units in this multifamily development, next question I ask is is it on a school district? Is it on school district property? If so, they have their own streamlining law. Is it a hotel motel property in a commercial lot, in a commercially zoned parcel? If so, they have their own streamlining. Is it institutionally zoned? And if it belongs to a university or religious institution, they have their own streamlining.
So pause on that. If the Meadows project had been affordable, then it would have gone through.
If the Meadows project had been affordable and met those, the owners of that parcel decided to meet those requirements,
Then it would have.
today they could have applied for this, yes. Certain office retail conversion projects, if they propose affordable, they have their own streamlining.
And this is new as of this year, or this is
No.
2019?
The ones that are new as of this year, well, all of these came about post 2021.
Okay, so these are in the last few years.
Yeah, these are all post 2021. The office retail parking conversion, this is your Sears. This is what the legislator was thinking. All these empty Sears buildings being converted into potentially residential development. Same thing here. This isn't as streamlined. I think this one also requires CEQA review. And they're proposing market rate here instead of affordable. But there's its own, it has its own procedure. If you could, if you don't mind scrolling just a little further down here. Now, we talked about the non-residential zone. If we're looking at the multifamily zone, which is where the city intends these things to be built, and they build a market rate development. If you remember, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, we talked about these like bungalow courts, and these bungalow courts being streamlined. AB 803, this is the law, and we codified that in our municipal code. This one right here, AB 803. This is the new one. Up to 10 units on a max of 5 acres, following specific procedures. This one I could see an applicant who knows how to use it, this type of project taking place in Sierra Madre. Municipal code, consistent project, that's something we hope to see. And for an affordable housing project, this is the SB 35 that I was talking about earlier. Initially, when all these laws were created, SB 35 was the first one that all these other ones are modeled on. And at the time, the legislator was contemplating something in the multifamily zone that's affordable, gets streamlining. Now, they've taken the streamlining concept and applied it to market rate. They've applied it to non-residential zones, affordable and market rate. So this idea is kind of ballooned and really taken off. And that concludes my presentation.
So the max 10 single multifamily unit on a max 5 acres, if there was, say, a big lot above Grandview, would they be able to streamline that process using that and put 10 bungalows, as you put it, up there?
Yes. There are strict procedures, I'll note, but if they follow it, yeah, they can.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? All right. Next up, Planning Commission reports.
I have nothing.
Not from me.
Last week, there was a CAL FIRE was here hosting a, I know, you were finally going to get to say. CAL FIRE was hosting a presentation about what they call the WUI, the Wildland Urban Interface. And one of the things they spoke about is this Zone 0. And Zone 0 is from 0 to 5 feet within your house, where it is supposed to have 0 vegetation. It has already been signed into law, but they have not come up with the enforcement mechanism for it yet. And that's the scary part for them, candidly, because how do you, I mean, I think you'd be hard pressed to drive around the city and see very many houses that don't have your traditional shrubbery right up into your house, which is also, I mean, they showed some incredible videos about some fire testing that has happened and how even the bark that we put catches on fire, starts to swirl in an eddy and catch the rest of the house on fire. I mean, just incredible testing and footage and knowledge there. But so that is something that we're going to see coming, and it's going to be an enforcement nightmare. So more to come on that from probably from Mr. City Attorney as it gets codified.
I may have to cut down my orange and grapefruit trees sitting up against my house.
They're not protected.
Maybe you can move them.
They're 100
Well,
years
and
old.
I mean, those were exactly some of the conversations that were being had by people in the room, is what if it's one of the protected species? How do we handle that? So it's a really sticky thing, and so they're working on that at the state level. But it was hosted here at the city, so my thanks to the city for hosting that event and inviting, both Commissioner Simcock and myself were there, so thank you. Planning and Community Preservation Department reports.
Thank you, Chair. So the next Planning Commission meeting will be on March 7th, and we'll be reviewing the conditional use permit regarding the use of villa for Alverno Heights Academy. That concludes my report.
All right. Anything else anybody wants to share? All right. Then that's a wrap. Thank you. We'll adjourn the meeting till our regularly placed meeting of March 7th.
What was the update on the potential typo that we were talking about last time? Was that a typo?
So far, we still think so.
Yeah.
But it's not confirmed to be.
We're waiting for Cal Fire
Okay.
to send us a letter in response, so.
Yeah.
But I think that's what they told me.
Randy was at the same thing, and Cal Fire was there, and he was talking to him there.
Yeah.
And he pretty much confirmed that it was,
So we're just waiting for it. in
they're
writing.
waiting to see what, what they want to issue, if anything.
Yeah.
So, it's,